I just hit record. I see the red button. We're live.
Okay, great. I see it up there as well.
So it's great to talk to you this morning, John.
Good to see you again, Kate. Always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah. So today we're talking about something that's kind of like the beginning, a very fundamental question, which during the busy day-to-day of parenting, I think can get lost. But actually, you're going to kind of walk us through something that is useful for parents to keep in mind all the time and can help us make decisions about kind of the normal day-to-day life. So our question is, what does it mean for kids to thrive? I know that different families have different values, and we all, some people might say my kid is thriving if they do really well in school. Some people might say my kid is thriving if they're happy. Some people might say my kid is thriving if they do well in sports, and a variety of so many other possibilities. But I think the question is there a more foundational way that from a psychological point of view, we can talk about a self-thriving. And, I remember when I first became a mom, just the question arose, which I hadn't really thought about so much before throughout my normal young adulthood, was, what does it mean to have a good life? And so part of that is values, and part of that is like something that just feels like you're feeling good, you're doing well, and you're able to kind of be resilient. So I'm curious how you think about all those big questions.
Okay, well, I will. I'll take a shot at it. Okay, it's actually a very good question. I think it's the idea of fundamentally what does it mean to thrive, and what is it that we're attempting to provide our children
right.
to allow them to have lives that go forward, that have energy and that are resilient and have joy and all the things that we want them to have. I think that you talk about your role as a mom. I remember that very well. That with my firstborn, they handed me a baby, and I looked at this little creature, and I was just dumbfounded by the fact that, one, I'd never held a baby before, and two, that holy cow, I mean, now this is my responsibility. And that experience of not really even knowing what the objective was, but knowing
right.
it was hugely important.
Right.
And that I already loved this little one. And I didn't want to screw it up. That was one thing I was clear about. I don't want to do this poorly.
Yeah, but how do you know if you are or you're not? I mean,
well, I think that's it. I think how you know whether you're doing it well or not is something that kind of evolves over time with experience, with your child's experience, their management of the world around them, the world of emotions within them, and that it's never a steady course. There's always regression and progress, and that's just part of the overall picture. But you used a word in asking me this question that I think is a really important word that we psychologists get pretty excited about, and it's the concept of self. The idea that on a fundamental level, the experienced and felt sense of self is what, in many ways, informs our process of managing life. And so if you were to ask me, what do we want our interactions with our kids to promote at that core level of self? And self, as I said a moment ago, it is a experienced and felt. There are narrative parts to it. Maybe I have a story about who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But even deeper than that is who I feel myself to be.
Interesting.
So the task at hand is to define what it is that we want to deposit in those little selves that we're given there to take care of. And for me, the kind of the easiest model to understand this is to say that there are two fundamental aspects of this evolving creature sense of self that we want to affirm through their experiences with us, through their experiences in the world that we supervise and structure and create and provide. And it's really two things. One is, do I experience and feel myself to be lovable? That's first and foremost. And secondly, do I experience and feel myself to be competent? Or being on in the process of an evolving sense of competency for little ones. That sense that am I figuring this stuff out? Am I able to manage the demands that come my way pretty well? And so those are the two central aspects of the self, kind of answering the question, am I lovable and am I competent? And almost everything we do as parents can some way be looked through the lens of how it either inhibits that or facilitates the affirmative action to both of the affirmative assessment of the little one's sense of self in both of those variables.
So that makes perfect sense when you talk about it. I think sort of looking within it doesn't feel so obvious. I mean, we are so used to ourselves and how we feel. It feels like we've felt that way forever. So from your experience of working with different people, how do those very core internal feelings manifest in how people are in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, if we're lucky, we have eggs in both of those baskets. I'm fundamentally lovable, which is kind of a state of being and has nothing to do with what I do. It's just I am. And I've got some eggs and I'm pretty competent. I've got this evolving sense of competence. If you're lucky, you got eggs in both of those baskets. That's what makes you really resilient. And it's what allows you to have maybe a bad day. Maybe you don't get invited to a birthday party that you wanted to get invited to. And this is overly simplistic, what I'm going to say, but it's an illustration. I didn't get invited to the birthday party, so I'm not feeling quite so lovable. And then I'm going to tend to the fact, but you know what? I'm the only one who got an A on that math paper today. Just that, or maybe I failed the math paper. I failed the math test, but mom's going to have cookies for me when I get home, and the dog loves me. And once again, those are all kind of conscious things, and so much of this is operating on some subconscious level. But if you have the gifts of eggs in both of those baskets, well, good for you, and good for your parents who helped you develop those, okay? And good for the life that didn't put you into too many situations that were unmanageable. I mean, that could be growing up in poverty. It could be growing up in a war zone. It could be growing up with a mom or a dad whose relationship is really complicated. And there's just so many variables that we'll talk about over our time together. But let's talk for a moment, if you want me to say, all right, what's the manifestation of not quite enough eggs in the I'm lovable basket? And then we'll talk about the other one. And how is it that one gets?
Yeah, exactly. I love that metaphor. It's so visual, and it lets us talk about how we help either, I don't know if parents put the eggs in or they help the kids kind of hatch their own eggs in each basket, or what it's, I can imagine a basket that's kind of almost empty, medium, and very full. So those are interesting questions.
I think this makes us anxious as parents, but I think largely we put the eggs in the baskets.
Okay.
Now, there are variables outside of what we have to provide. I mean, everything that we have control over, everything from, little one's sense of being lovable is a sense that people know them, they get them, they have agency, so that when I cry, mom looks sad. She says, "Oh, what's going on?" And when I'm excited, mom looks excited. That's that sense that there's this connection, and these people are they're this mirror. When I see joy in my mom's, eyes, when mom laughs when I do something silly, or it's all those things that are all about just the affirmation of the fact that I just for who I am. Now, maybe being silly or telling a joke, that's kind of doing something, but not really, because generally speaking, when you're laughing at little ones because they tell a joke, it's not because the joke is funny. It's that you realize you're having this moment of enjoying them, and them seeing you enjoy them, and how wonderful it is for kids to see their parents take joy out of them, from them, not out of them, but from them. So then there's the whole issue of do these people, are they lovingly caring for me? Do they know what I need? Do they read my cues? And I remember, I think I told you this story before, about a friend of mine's son had his first baby, and he asked his mom, he was similar to what I described myself. He said, "Mom, I don't know what to do." And she made it very simple for him. That she said there are 4 possibilities, and 3 of them are almost always at play. So they either need to be changed, they're hungry, or they're bored, and very, very rarely they're sick. So when they're cranky, you got to figure that out. And so our ability as parents, because these little guys, one, they oftentimes don't even know what they need, but there's something that's not right. The sense that we are attuned to them, that we can feel and know what it is that they need, is an enormous part of a child feeling lovable. That's the affirmation. That's the love in action, in service to the child.
So it's not even so much being, gushy or telling them you love them. It's really this being attuned and understanding what they need. And maybe I'm jumping ahead, but if there's just 4 things that a baby needs, that only gets more complicated as kids grow up.
Yes, it does. Yeah. But they're still pretty damn close. They're correlates. They're correlates to that. And I think that absolutely, that process of discernment, the empathic attunement, that's where the juice is. It's not, it's fine, and it's nice to tell our little ones that they're cute or we love them so much, and that's fine. That's good, particularly if the affect that we're showing it with is felt by them. But the words don't mean much.
Right. Or dressing them in the baby outfit that you think is so cute. I feel like there's a lot of expressing love that way, and Yeah. And that just, it's a good thing that babies are so cute, because they're a lot of work. They rob you of sleep and worry and all those things. And we're hardwired to find those little creatures cute, and that's a good thing. But, once again, if dealing with a mom that's struggling with postpartum depression, or there's alcoholism, or there are all kinds of things that can weigh heavy on the mom's spirit or the dad's spirit, that they're not able to be very emotionally present and reflect back both a high level of attunement and a joy in the meeting of those needs. Because sometimes we can get into a pattern of, we meet the need. And I'm not saying that 3:00 in the morning, when you've been woken up 4 times by an infant, you're supposed to be joyful in your interactions. You got to be realistic with yourself and gentle. But it does mean that most of the time, and even then, you do your best to not put them on an iceberg and send them out somewhere. So that's how that evolves there. And if it doesn't evolve for kids who don't have that core sense of being lovable, the outcome is complicated, and it could be that they become hugely invested in being competent. So they compensate by trying to always figure it out and do the right thing. And that's exhausting, and it ultimately doesn't work that great. But that's one possibility. Another possibility is that as they move towards being fully dependent upon the caretaker to keep them safe
is these are kids who are much more likely to not take good care of themselves. Because you discover that you're worthy of taking good care of by being taken good care of. And so you can see kids who can be involved in reckless behaviors. You can see kids who enter relationships awkwardly and don't, and good parents. So, I mean, I know that sometimes listening to this sort of thing, you go, and you think about your own kids, you go, oh my God, you were in trouble. 95% of the kids make it through this just fine. Or maybe 85% of the kids make it through just fine. But that deficit can also set the stage for putting tremendous energy into somehow becoming what you think other people need you to be, and can squelch the capacity for kind of self-love, can squelch the capacity for self-expression, just always trying to figure out what this other person needs to be. The exquisite empathic attunement that children have to their parents' inner world. And so it means it's very difficult to protect them. That's why if we're struggling, then we need to do whatever we have to do, whether it's self-care or therapy or whatever, to kind of get on track, because our kids they're gonna read that stuff. And then that's kind of problematic. So should I move on to the other basket?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one thought that I'm sort of having is that I imagine that it's sort of on a continuum. So if we say that 85% of kids kind of get through just fine, but there's still, I feel like a lot of adults are managing and leading good, worthy lives, but yet kind of still, are looking for something or feel a little bit of deficit there. So, and likewise, parents can't be 100% attuned all the time. I'm sure that's not even ideal.
It's not.
But yet, if we're keeping this in mind, we can kind of prioritize it a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at just the explosion of self-help, the number of people who are in therapy now, the people that are, working with gurus or teachers of metaphysics and yoga. And I think we are a culture, and we're not going to go into the reasons for that now, but we can talk about it at some point. We are a culture that's under a lot of stress, and we absorb it as parents, and our kids absorb it from us, and that's that's a dilemma that we have to.
So let me ask you something. So if a child had their lovability egg basket pretty well filled, do they then reach adulthood, not seeking out self-help and not feeling kind of the need for those things?
I think what they reach adulthood and go, because we're a tribal species and we are it is within our DNA to want partners. So they reach adulthood and they go, I want somebody to share my life with. I want someone to love me the way I know I can be loved, and I want to love them the way I know I can love them. So they reach adulthood, and it's not about, they don't need to be autonomous, because that's not how we work. But they enter into those love relationships with much less apprehension and probably more openness. And the fact is, the less apprehension and the more openness you come into a relationship, the more likely you are to find a deep connection. So this early love stuff facilitates later love stuff, and then so I mean, and I think that if we didn't get that stuff when we were kids, it doesn't mean that we can't find it in other places.
Right.
We may very much find it in our relationship with our spouse. There's a notion that marriage is. Carl Whitaker said that marriage is a lifelong endeavor in co-therapy, and we're trying to heal each other. We're trying to make each other. We're trying to fill those baskets for each other. And my wife, who works with me some in family work, whenever I say that, she'll find some point later in the day to playfully say to me, whenever you say that, it makes me feel like I'm not a very good therapist. And I have to, well, you've done what you could with me.
Well, she seems to have hung in there, so she can't be too
hung in
unhappy
there.
with her work.
Hung in there. And she clearly would acknowledge that there are probably days when I don't think I must have been a very good therapist.
Okay.
All right. So you want to talk about that other
Yes.
side, the other basket for a minute? Okay. Well, the other basket is once again hugely tied to our work as a parent, and part of it is our attunement to what's just beyond where they are, because it's about always challenging them, but challenging them at a level where they can actually achieve it. And Vygotsky referred that as the zone of proximal development, and Kohut talked about optimal frustration.
So it's a little bit above where they are.
A little bit above where they are. And Kohut talked about it, that it was interesting that if you don't challenge kids enough, if you don't put them in situations where they get to have an evolving sense of, oh my goodness, I did well, it has the exact same impact as putting kids who consistently in situations that are beyond their ability. Because they come away from that enfeebled. I can't do it. I'm incompetent. Not being challenged, I'm incompetent. And that's both sides of that are enfeebling to kids.
Yeah.
And so, it means that we've got to read kids carefully. And the dilemma is that what they're able to do today, they may not be able to do tomorrow. Maybe they had a sad day with one of their friends, or their dog likes their brother better. It feels like, so it's just all of the little things that will reduce a child's resiliency to persevere in the face of a challenge. So it requires ongoing attunement. It isn't a one-shot deal. Well, he could do this, so, he did it last week, so he can do it today. It's not how it works.
Right.
So we're always having to look at that. And the more experiences that kids have that are in that range, I think I've told you before, Kate, talking about skiing with my kids, that you'll oftentimes have one parent who tends to be a little more challenging, and one who's a little more gentle and not as challenging. And in our relationship, it's not terribly unusual. But in my wife's and my relationship with our kids, I was the one who tended to challenge a little too much. And in skiing, it manifested itself in that we were this young family. It was expensive to go skiing. We'd get up on the mountain, and whichever kid was with dad would oftentimes, after maybe a couple hours, find themselves back in the lodge crying. Because I had pushed it. I know there's the zone of proximal development. I just passed it.
Blew past that.
Or zone of optimal frustration. I just passed it. And their mom, I might see as we're heading up the lift, that a half hour after being out on the slopes, they're down drinking hot chocolate in the lodge.
I'm with you.
And my son, who was with me, says, "I don't want to go skiing with you again, Dad." And my daughter's more than happy to go drink hot chocolate, but she's never going to learn how to ski.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying I chose. With time, we got really good at finding that zone. She helped me, and I helped her.
Right.
But that is the deal: is finding that. And each time our kids have an experience of growth, people will sometimes ask me about, particularly kids with learning struggles, they'll ask me about therapy. Should they be in therapy? And I'm not a big child therapy advocate. I'm much more committed to the idea of helping parents understand what their kids need and meet that need. But they'll ask me, should my kid be in therapy? And my first instinct is to say, no, maybe you guys should be. And secondly, get him a really good teacher. Because you know what really good teachers do? They know how to know right where you are. And when you leave a learning session with a good teacher, it's hard to not feel good about yourself because you've just made a step. Right. So it's a powerful thing, and it's a useful thing to always be thinking about. I don't want to challenge too much, and I don't want to challenge too little, because my child's fundamental sense of self around their evolving competency is going to be tied to having lots of those experiences right in that sweet spot.
Interesting. So it's challenging but doable. And so there is a role for the parent in terms of being super empathetic and trying to set up those situations, and but life is messy and you can't always kind of control that. I think that there's also a space for a narrative around that, right? So
yes.
Helping to make sense of if they didn't quite get it, kind of saying, well, a lot of people struggle their first year in college. I mean, I know that there's specific research about that. Or if it was not challenging enough, a sort of like, wow, you have grown so much. I wasn't even, I wasn't caught up to where you are. So there's opportunities for recovery.
They're absolutely, you're not always going to hit the spot, and there's all kinds of opportunity for recovery. And once is, we'll talk about this more down the road, but once you figure out how to find the child emotionally in response to either not being able to approach the challenge or not, or having been, once you figure out how to kind of help them feel felt around that experience, you can then start to create a narrative. You gotta start with helping them kind of experience. Children live much more in that, you've heard me say I'm informed, my work is informed by both attachment theory and a field called interpersonal neurobiology, where we look at the way brains work, and the idea that this comes out of Dan Siegel's initial work, the idea that there's three parts. There's the brain, there's the mind, and then there's relationships. And that when we are able to kind of stay in the process with a youngster emotionally, we quiet them. And then in the context of relationship, we help them create a narrative. But you can't start with a narrative. With a child that's vibrating, you can't start telling them what's going on. First, they have to experience you as present. We'll talk about this a lot more under the heading of co-regulation. With kids who have a hard time regulating their emotions. First, they've got to have a sense that you get it. You not only get it up here, you get it here. And then you can help them create a narrative about it.
Okay.
And that's integrating, from Siegel's standpoint, that's taking that right hemisphere feeling, kind of joining it, bringing it up, and then creating a left hemisphere narrative about it. When you have both of those sides cooking, that's when you're really at your optimal state.
Okay. Okay, so I think this has been super helpful. So we're kind of, if there's two things that we can keep in our minds amongst like packing our kids' backpacks and getting their lunches and getting ourselves ready for work whenever we go back to work and all that kind of stuff. It's a sense of filling the love basket and filling the competency basket. Yep.
That's to keep that in mind, and also be, as you said, be gentle with yourself, because you're not always going to make it. And someday we'll talk about the fact the best parent is what's referred to oftentimes through the research is the good enough parent, not the perfect parent, but not the always attuned and protective parent, but not the one who's not attuned enough. So be gentle with yourself when you screw it up. We, both of our kids, at some point in time, we introduced to them when they were kids the idea that the best parent is a good enough parent, and they were telling us we weren't good enough. And we said, no, we're just shooting for good enough, guys. And they'd say, well, you're missing it.
That's really funny. I just want to leave then. So you gave some great examples with the baby in terms of that kind of lovability, eggs in the lovability basket. What does that look like when, kids are in grade school and kids are getting a little bit older?
Yeah. And teenagers need it as much as anybody. I think, the key piece of it is the expression of a sense of joy in their presence. That when they come into the room, you don't go directly to something that you need to help them with, or you muster a smile, maybe a touch, maybe a hug, say, oh buddy, so good to see you. It's just finding the point of coming back together is important. comings and goings are very important in terms of attachment and having it secure. So when you come back together, you have a little your own awareness of I need to hook him in emotionally. I need to hook him in with a little love. And before he leaves, I need to hook him in with a little, I need to send him off with a little love. I will say the same thing applies in marriage. Coming and going in marriage is really important. You'll see as we talk that this field of attachment that really started out looking primarily at mother-child relationships has now bloomed in the work of people like Sue Johnson, has bloomed into awareness that it isn't a whole lot different between adult to adult. And the more we know about it, the better at we can be.
Yeah.
But we adults, we're kind of proud, and we don't want anybody to think that we have a child's heart.
Right.
We do.
So, I can think of a lot of things that can get in the way with that. I mean, everything from being late to being stressed and thinking about something else to you're not being finished with your work when your kid comes home or when you come home. I mean, so is it like a fake it to make it thing where you just have to know how important that is and just kind of
yes, as much as possible. And if you're not able to, it certainly happens to me. I'll be on the phone with a patient. I had a home office during much of the time I had 2 offices, but one was in the home, and one of the kids might need something, and I'd be working, or I'd be on the phone or something, and a moment when a child needs you is a complicated moment because we don't want them to just be tyrants and say they can't wait at all, because then we just feel irritated. They finally get it from us, and it's no gift because they've stolen our attention.
Right.
We've been able to give it to them. So I'm not saying that it's, I think you need to be able to say, no, not right now. But then you need to go find them and say, I'm sorry. Nobody's more important than you. But right in that moment, I had to do that. So you make little repairs. In attachment, we talk about the strengthening of the relationships is all about connect, tear, and repair. Tears are not a problem. Matter of fact, tears in relationships are much like tears. We build muscle strength by bearing muscle fiber, and then it heals and it's stronger. And that I have a simplistic notion of the physiology of that, so that may not be fully accurate, but I've heard that many times. But that is that's the process, and that when we make the repair, we're good. Matter of fact, the relationship's actually stronger because tears are inevitable. They're absolutely inevitable. And when we can have one and it doesn't terrify us that now there's a tear, we're going to stay like this. This happens in couples a lot.
Yeah.
They tear and they don't know how to find each other again. So those tears are going to happen. And just go, here's an opportunity for a repair.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
So, okay, so that's interesting. So that's pretty simple actually to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I can certainly see, for example, if you're frustrated or annoyed with the person, that it can be hard to kind of come back and repair. But I think we'll probably talk about that in different sessions. Yeah. So wonderful. All
right.
Capability. Put eggs in both baskets.
That's our job. And then it's also to be gentle with ourselves, because when we're not able to, if it promotes a sense of shame in us, then that doesn't help either. Guilt, saying, "Oh, I feel bad about that," but shame is that, "Oh my God, I'm not who I need to be for my kid." And so, any instruction that anybody gives you about parenting, from my perspective, has to include the caveat that you're not always going to be able to do it, and you got to be gentle with yourself about that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that's a great message to stop on for today.
That sounds great, Kate. Well, then it's a pleasure, and we'll see you sometime soon.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, John.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.